Season 2 is almost here and you don't want to be caught not knowing what you have to do in Neltharion's Lair, a Legion dungeon that has been brought back for the current Mythic Plus pool, and here you're gonna learn all about the routes and strategies, abilities to dodge, abilities to interrupt, and basically all you need to get your Neltharion's Lair M+ runs in time. So, welcome to the complete and ultimate guide for the dungeon, and as always, these guides are made possible through the support of our Patreons, patreon.com/Marcelian&Online. They make it all possible since these videos don't really do that well, and it's a passion project and we love doing it. So hey, if you ever considered becoming a Patreon, now is the best time. Check the link in the description. There's a lot of goodies there for you, not to mention supporting all of the stuff that we do around here. You checked that out? Okay, now let's go! The route here is pretty linear and you can pick a couple of packs to skip or kill depending on your own preferences. Meanwhile, we prepare for you the route we use at the moment and you can find a link to it in the description below, along with other routes we prepared up to this point. The dungeon starts with a waterfall drop into the first trash area where we encounter an Ember Shard Scorpion surrounded by a pack of little Vile Shard Crawlers. And to the left, in the water, a couple of rockback Gnashers are watching you cross their territory. You can avoid them if you want, but they're pretty easy percentage, so we pull them along with the other trash packs we clear here. The Gnashers use Bone Chomp on the tank, dealing physical damage and leaving a dot on them for 8 seconds. This hits pretty hard if you pull a bunch of them together, so pop defensive cooldowns if it feels needed. They also have another ability, but they only use it later on in the dungeon, when they are accompanied by a hunter who orders them around, so you have nothing to worry about when it comes to the loner ones as they don't do anything too special. The crawlers are always pretty easygoing, they don't hurt much and don't have a lot of health. They do, however, drop a green pool of acid splatter when they die, dealing nature damage to whoever stands in them, so don't stand in them, obviously. The Scorpions deal tank damage with their Impaling Shard, inflicting physical damage and leaving a dot on their target. Tar Spitter Lurkers are the first actually annoying trash mobs here. After you pull them, they submerge, teleporting behind a random player and start casting Viscid Bile, a frontal attack dealing nature damage to anyone in front of them, so sidestep this. They also seem to sometimes reset aggro after a submerge, so tanks, keep an eye on them. When they die, they also drop a green pool of bad stuff called Rancid Ooze. As per usual, move out of this as it will deal nature damage to whoever steps in. The next pack we generally skip, but for the sake of a complete video, we will discuss their abilities anyway. It is formed of Vile Shard Hulk, a Vile Shard Chunk, and a bunch of little crawlers again. The Chunk will occasionally cast Crush, creating a big swirly you should run out of. This isn't too difficult to deal with, but it's annoying for the melees and tank in combination with the Vile Shard Hulk, the priority mob to kill here as he does a dangerous piercing shards frontal, just like the ones in Azure Vaults you're used to. This is a cone attack which deals heavy nature damage on impact and some extra in the form of a dot, so tanks, make sure to point this away from your party members just the way you learned in your tanking one-on-one lessons. The Hulk also hits the tank with Fracture, dealing physical damage and knocking them back, so again, care with positioning. The Understone Drudges near the bridge only seem to have melee attacks, so you can pull them with the previous pack if you want to skip something else later, but we generally prefer to just skip them and the previous pack by walking down here in the water and jumping in the waterfall. Be careful when you jump to not get too close to the dredges and end up pulling them anyway. And also take a look at where you're going to jump because sometimes you may land on a rock and die. Some groups prefer to pull them down here anyway and kill them off while they wait for the first boss to become active or send someone down in advance to activate the boss for the rest of the party. The first boss, Rokmora, is a pretty simple one, but he hits like a truck at the moment, so make sure you go into the fight prepared with your defensive and offensive cooldowns. As you damage the boss, Blight Shard Skitters spawn out of crystals falling off from his body. They deal melee damage, so tanks should try to taunt the further ones into melee for better cleave, and the entire party should swap to them or cleave or AoE them down as fast as possible. When they die, the skitters will drop a green pool of choking dust, dealing nature damage to whoever stands in it, pretty much the same as the trash pools we've seen on the first packs. So, move out of these. The boss will occasionally slam the ground, turning it into crystalline ground, filling the room with crystals which hurt when you move, so stand still until this diminishes away from under your feet. When he reaches full energy, Rokmora will cast Shatter, dealing large amounts of AoE damage and destroying all his skitters. The more skitters are alive, the harder Shatter is going to hit you, so you want to make sure that most, if not all, adds are dead before this happens. Or else. A bit after every Shatter, the boss will cast Razor Shards, a frontal cone attack in the direction he's already facing. So, tanks, be careful where you face him, and everyone else, make sure you are never in his face. This is a 100-yard long range attack, so don't even try to outrange it. Once the boss is dead, jump into the barrels Hobbit style and go down the river. The mobs on the side will not harm you, but you can throw a fish at this snail here for the achievement and he will speedily run away and go down the waterfall. Now that you've had your fun slapping fish around, playing river barrel, it's time to get serious and deal with the new trash mobs in the area. Here we encounter more Drogbar trash mobs. We have Understone Drummers, Stoneclaw Hunters, Rockbound Pelters, and Mightstone Breakers. Most groups used to hug the right side and clear mobs there on the way to the next boss. The drummers you never really want to pull, and if you do, you want to keep them in some form of CC for most of the time. When they get in combat, they rush to a nearby war drum and start drumming, making a lot of noise and summoning more mobs every couple of seconds to attack you. The summoned mobs don't give any percentage as usual, so there's no reason to let the drummer cast. If it gets pulled, make sure to keep it CC'd away from the drum. Stuns, typhoons, and rings of pieces are your best friends here. The Stoneclaw Hunters cast Stone Shatter, smashing the ground and dealing physical damage to all nearby targets. They are accompanied by Gnashers we found at the start of the dungeon, who were only casting Bone Chomp back then. But now, with the Hunter's Kill Command ability, they will also cast Stone Gaze, stunning their target for 6 seconds. Lucky for you, you can either interrupt this or dispel it off the victim it goes through. Now let's see to the real nasty trash in here. The Mightstone Breakers will cast Avalanche, combining a frontal cone attack with a heavy AoE damage on your party. But guess what? You can avoid that, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As soon as you see them casting it, sidestep away from where you're standing and don't go to the location of another player, unless you would like to get hit by his sky-falling rocks. The melees should never be in front of them either, otherwise they will be hit by the frontal. The tanks can also sidestep this if they're fast enough. The pelters are casting Jagged Disc at random targets, and occasionally retreat when targeted by melee attacks. If you want to keep them neatly grouped up, cleave them from a different main target with your melee attacks. At the moment, they seem to not retreat as much from ranged attacks, so your ranged players should be able to safely attack them as main targets. Pets count as melee by the way, so keep that in mind. The next pack is formed of a Vile Shard Hulk, which we already discussed in the first part of the dungeon, and a Blight Shard Shaper. These attack random targets with Stone Bolt, an interruptible attack which doesn't do too much damage anyways. They also occasionally summon a Petrifying Totem near a random player. The totem will take a few seconds to appear, and when it does, it will form a red cloud of mist around it. Standing in the mist will deal increasing damage to you and apply the Petrifying Cloud stackable debuff every second. Upon reaching 10 stacks, this will stun you for 10 seconds if it hasn't killed you already. The good news? The stacks are dispellable, so maybe if you're a dummy, your healer might not be. If you get stunned and turned into a crystal, your party can also DPS it down, but hey, just don't stand in it. Also, the totem currently has almost no health, which we believe will change in a hotfix soon, as it currently is a non-mechanic. The next room is the second boss room, and we recommend clearing all the mobs in the area before pulling the boss. For more percentage, you can also go to this cave here to the right and pull the Pelter and the Shaper inside. In this area, you will also find a Burning Geode. This will cast Scorch at players, dealing heavy damage to anyone who stands in the exploding swirlies. Ularogg Cragshaper is a fun boss with a puzzle minigame you will learn to fight over and hate. First off, he will do his intro jump, looking cool and knocking everyone back. His next attack is generally Sunder, dealing large amounts of nature damage to the tank, so pop a defensive when this comes. Throughout the fight, he will cast Strike of the Mountain, spawning a bunch of rocky hands around the players which will slap you if you stand in there too long. So when they spawn, carefully walk outside of the slap zone in between the hands to get safe. If you touch the hands on your way out, you'll get slapped pretty hard, so make sure to not high-five them, alright? The boss will also cast Bellow of the Deeps, summoning bellowing idols which will channel falling debris to damage your party as long as they are up, so cleave them down quickly. When the boss reaches full energy, he casts Stance of the Mountain and Phase 2 starts. 4 burrowing idols will spawn around the central area, and the boss will also burrow on the ground, turning into an idol himself, removing all dots and debuffs you have on him. Keep a careful eye on the middle idol, which the boss turned into. All the idols will start shifting around the room in a shell game type minigame. Basically, you need to keep your eyes on the prize, aka the boss idol, and at the end of their shifting, when they become attackable, mark the correct one and kill it for the boss to respawn. You can even turn off your UI with Alt-Z in order to see these better. You will take constant damage from falling debris as long as this phase continues, so if you're slow to find the correct one when they become attackable, this will become harder and harder to deal with, so pop defensive CDs to help your healer out. Back in Legion, there was a Wikora or an add-on that was auto-marking the correct idol at the end of the shift, but I think it got removed, maybe? In any case, expect a Wikora to become available soon enough. After the second boss is dead, the way towards the rest of the dungeon opens up. You can skip the next pack of mobs by hugging the wall to the left and jumping over this rock here. You should probably sap the closest mob or use some form of stealth if you don't trust yourself to jump, but the trash mobs are pretty focused on the snail racing at that point anyways, so they generally don't see you sneaking about. Past the snail racing area, you can pull some of the gnashers in the lake here for some extra percentage. These no longer have the Stone Gaze ability from earlier, as they have no master. As for the trash towards the third boss, you already met all of them except one. The Stoneclaw Grub Masters in this area cast Stone Shatter, dealing AoE damage to nearby players. Their most important spell, however, is Worm Call, where they throw a little tar spitter grub on the floor and the grub starts a long cast of Metamorphosis. Given that you have 10 seconds to either kill the grub before it transforms or simply stun it out of the cast, you shouldn't need to know anything more. But let's be honest, you are going to find that pug group where everything goes wrong and the cast goes through. If this happens, the grub will become a Rot Drool Grabber, yet another type of worm-like creature who spawns with patches of rancid pool around it, so avoid standing in them. This is particularly difficult for melees, but they should have just stunned it in the first place, am I right? Melees. The grabber will also cast Barbed Tongue, targeting random players and trying to pull them into a green goop and even melee them if the tank doesn't have his aggro in check. Either way, try to avoid having these spawn, as they can spawn in weird locations in the back, away from the group. They force you to run back or maybe even pull trash you don't want. Just kill the grubs! Naraxas is the third boss of the dungeon, and it requires positioning and attention from your whole group, as she also has a lot of abilities. Throughout the fight, she will try to poison you, drag you into her burrow, or try to sacrifice drug bars. The boss will periodically affect 2 players with Rancid Mob, and she seems to prefer the ranged DPS for these abilities, or ranged in general. Healers can be that too. This will place a green circle around you, and as soon as the flying ball of goo reaches the player, it will deal moderate nature damage and drop a pool of toxic bile, and the messy stuff will form at your feet. This used to be useful for later on in the fight when the tank needed to run away from the boss. However, with the latest version of the dungeon available at the moment, the pools only provide a 50% slow for the ads that join the fight, and they disappear as soon as an ad touches them. They no longer affect players in any way. Wormspeaker Devouts drop down from the side and rush towards the boss to sacrifice themselves for her with Fanatic's Sacrifice. You need to place the slowing pools between the area the ads come from and the boss, so they run into them on their way and get slowed. The DPS need to swap to them and kill them as soon as possible, because if they reach the boss, she will gain stacks of Ravenous for each victim she eats, increasing her damage by 50%. This is a stackable buff and it lasts for the entire fight. So the more ads she eats, the harder she hits you. Eating players will also increase her damage, so be very careful when she casts Spiked Tongue and tries to eat up your tank. This is a long cast where she latches onto her target and tries to pull them into her maw, dealing physical damage for 5 seconds. Failing to stay away from her will get her to start devouring the tank. Getting eaten not only grants her the 50% damage buff, but it also pretty much kills your tank, unless he has some sort of immunity like Bubble, or if you have a paladin friend in the group to bop you if you're slow and become dinner. So, when she starts casting her Spiked Tongue, the tank should run like hell and do everything he can to not get eaten. Make use of leaps, gateways, rescues, etc., or simply use the room provided to you. There are eggs around the room, and I'm sure there are plenty of safe spots you can find. The ones we know are this patch of 3 eggs on the right and another similar one on the left here. Or just be a Death Knight and don't care. You have Death's Advance, and you're used to ignoring mechanics anyway. No matter where you decide to go, just don't get eaten. Tanks should also be careful with being in range of the boss as much as possible outside of the Spiked Tongue attack. Whenever she's not engaged in melee combat, the boss casts Putrid Skies, dealing heavy nature damage to the entire group. The boss will also occasionally cast Toxic Wretch, spewing bile at players, dropping toxic pools in melees, which you should avoid, and leaving a dot on your party which you can dispel if someone in your group has the ability to dispel poison. Also, pop defensives and or healing cooldowns here. At 20% HP, she will roar and go into a frenzy, increasing her attack speed and physical damage dealt by 20%. This is particularly painful when combined with previous stacks of Ravenous, so once again, don't let her eat! Another thing to mention here. As you fight the boss, the crowd of Drogbars on the sides is getting more and more violent as you kill their precious worm boss, so they start hurling rocks at you. You cannot really do much about them, but the longer the fight lasts, the more this is going to hurt, especially combined with the Toxic Wretch poison debuffs, so keep an eye on your health at all times. Once she's down, drop down her burrow and arrive at the last area of the dungeon. Here, you'll find a couple of new abilities on mobs we know and also some new mobs. We have the new Understone Demolishers, who only deal melee damage until they cast Charskin, transforming into a colossal Charskin who will cast Burning Hatred, fixating on a random non-tank player and dealing heavy melee damage if they reach their target. Keep this mob stunned and kited when possible and kill it with priority. The Ember Husk Dominators are riding dangerous scorpion mounts, and they will often cast Crystal Spikes, dealing nature damage to 3 players, and this will prefer your ranged players. If you lack the ranged, they will go on your melees as well. Pop defensive CDs when the spikes start hitting too hard in order to help out your healer. The Scorpion will cast Ember Swipe, a frontal attack dealing physical damage, so make sure to point this away from the group. The Drogbar will occasionally hit his Scorpion, sending him into a frenzy, increasing its melee attack speed and damage done by 25%. So keep an eye on this and soothe the poor Scorpion before he kills your tank. The rock-bound trappers in this area cast Jagged Disc, just like their pelter buddies, so you have to deal with the incoming constant damage from this which is more dangerous on your tank here as he's also dealing with the scorpions. On top of this, they also cast Bound. This is always on your tank, and if it is not interrupted, it will deal physical damage and stun them for 4 seconds. So keep your eyes open and stop this cast. Once you clear this area, you can pull the boss. Dargrul is the master Rokmora, and he is a pretty nasty one at that. He will deal heavy tank damage throughout the fight, so make sure to have your defensives ready for him. He will occasionally cast crystal spikes at random players, forming a swirly under them which will form into a wall of crystal and deal damage upon forming and knocking back anyone who stands in them. Dodge the swirly and save the spikes for later. The boss will also cast Magma Sculptor, summoning a molten charskin to kill your friends. The charskin will cast Burning Hatred, fixating on a random party member. You can CC the charskin if you're busy with other mechanics for the time being, but we recommend just kiting the charskin into the crystal spikes you spawned around the room. These will stun him and make him take 100% extra damage for 10 seconds with Crystal Cracked. You should finish off the charskin while he is stunned by these and not waste multiple spikes on him. The boss will also cast Landslide, slamming the ground, causing it to erupt in a frontal line, dealing heavy nature damage and knocking back any player standing in it. This will also destroy any crystal spikes in its way. So, tanks, make sure to aim this away from any spikes and your party. It's best if you tank this boss against the wall, and this way you will avoid being yeeted around the room, getting out of range of the healer or killing anyone with it. On top of this, every time the boss takes a step, the earth shatters and deals damage to your entire group with Magma Breaker, so especially in high keys, you probably don't want to move him around too much. After each landslide, the boss will swing his fancy hammer and cause the ground to erupt from under the tank, inflicting heavy nature damage with Molten Crash, so try to avoid it whenever possible. At full energy, Dargrul will start casting Magma Wave, his most notable ability perhaps. This is a group-wide, deadly ability and it's a tricky one at that. As he starts casting it, he will smash the ground, inflicting very heavy fire damage to all players who didn't take cover behind the crystal spike that spawned earlier. So basically, take cover! Don't worry, you can still DPS from behind these. Everyone needs to hide behind there if they would like to survive, and keep an eye on the combat timers as this attack will happen as he starts casting the Magma Wave and not at the end of the cast. The tank needs to pay attention to this as well and not be too far from the spikes or get leaped or rescued to safety. After every Magma Wave, a lava geyser will remain in the location the boss did his ability, and it will occasionally spew some more fire at random players with Flame Gout. Don't step into this and pop defensive cooldowns if the damage gets too rough throughout the fight. That's pretty much it. Congratulations, now you're a master of Neltharion's Lair, and doing a complete Mythic Plus run and 3 chesting in and all of that has never been easier. Thank you for watching up until this point. Let me know in the comments if it was helpful, and don't you worry, we're gonna have guides like this for all the dungeons in Season 2 of Dragonflight. Once again, big thank you for the patrons who are supporting these Mythic Plus guides. And hey, once again, check the link in the description if you want to join the team that way. There's plenty of goodies there for you, plus supporting the content, obviously. Thank you for watching. Have a great one ahead. See you in the next guide. Bye-bye.
Loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW. Still.